Now, I know what you're thinking. It's the year 2023. Pokémon Ultra Sun came out 6 years ago in November of 2017. How can I, an avid Pokémon fan, claim that this is a blind hardcore Nuzlocke? Well, until June of this year, the only previous time I had tried to play either of the Pokémon games from Gen 7 onward, I could not get past the enormous amount of unskippable cutscenes at the start. So, it seemed like a good idea to make my first playthrough of any of these games a hardcore blind Nuzlocke of Pokémon Ultra Sun, widely regarded as one of, if not the most difficult vanilla game to Nuzlocke. But surely it can't be as difficult as they say, right? I guess I'll find out. I'm AboPP, and these are my attempts at completing a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokémon Ultra Sun completely blind. In a Nuzlocke, if a Pokémon faints, it's dead. That's it, gone. I can also only catch one Pokémon per area, but this is a bit loosely defined in Ultra Sun due to pinwheel clause. I can't look up anything about the game other than the locations of specific items, and lastly, I also decide to not EV train my Pokémon. My other rules are stated on screen. The only thing I look up before starting are the level caps. I start by picking my starter, a Popplio called Honkers. After a lot of useless cutscenes featuring a purple cloud, the Spearow from the first episode of the anime, a blonde lady, and Tapu Koko, I am able to progress further. Oh wait, nope. There's more cutscenes with Hala, the kahuna of Melemele Island. My first encounter is a grubbin called Patters. I also play with the Rockruff because it's been a while since I've played a 3DS game and I really wanted to enjoy the fun interactions you could have with Pokemon. I have a battle with How next, but win it easily because I'm way too over-leveled. I then go to Kukui's house and he takes a Rotom out of his whatever. Moving on, I catch an Inkay called Inkers and a Grimer called Grimers. I then lose battles to an Ekans fight at the trainer school due to being trapped with Rap and not being able to switch out. That's okay, it's only attempt 1, right? I then get a really good encounter in Furfrou called Fruers. I'm really creative with these nicknames. Also, you might randomly see the sprites go monochrome in the overlay, and that's due to issues with PokeLink. Rest assured, I will let you know if there's a major death. If it seems like I'm stalling, it's because, you guessed it, there's more cutscenes. Next up, I have a big fight against Ilima, and I'm unsure what to expect, and almost lose Inkers, but Honkers pulls through against the Yungoos. For the Smeargle, who hits surprisingly hard, I have no answers and eventually wipe, thus ending attempt 1. Okay. Attempt 2 goes the same for my first 2 encounters, and at the trainer school, this time, I catch an Alolan Meowth instead of Grimers, which is a decent encounter with fake out support. Meowth is really good against Ilima and is able to take out the Yungoos and do decent damage into Smeargle. Honkers, Grubbers and Inkers are able to take out the Smeargle to give me my furthest attempt. I then catch an Ekans called Snakers, which will be a fantastic encounter for almost all future runs because it provides early access to Intimidate. And then, I accidentally click on the Festival Plaza thing and I'm unable to leave for a good few minutes, which is so fucking annoying. Why is this forced on you without giving you the ability to leave until like 5 different things are done? Anyway, when I'm finally allowed to leave, I catch a Ghastly called Gassers, which should be useful. Unfortunately, Snakers overlevels during a battle, so I can't use him for the first trial. Speaking of which, during the first trial, I have a fight against a Gumshoos, and due to not knowing much about the game, but knowing that Gumshoos is the first Totem Pokemon, I just assume that this is the Totem fight and lose Gassers after wrongly assuming that Gumshoos didn't have a dark move. To be fair to myself, the Gumshoos didn't use it until it was just about to faint. But anyway, I even changed my level cap to 16 on the overlay assuming that the trial was done after this fight. This does mean that for the actual Totem Gumshoos, I only have 4 Pokemon. I lead with Grubbers, hoping for some success via Mud Slaps. I get off a couple but then switch to Inkers, who gets a defense boost from Leer due to Contrary. Inkers is able to use Reflect and then get off great damage with Foul Play. I then switch in Meowth, who gets crit from Gumshoos' tackle and then falls due to a stakeout boosted tackle from the Yungoos. Honkers comes in and takes out Gumshoos with Water Gun, which means I eventually win, but I've lost 2 Pokemon during this trial. Oh, and for future reference, as per my rules, the level cap starts at the start of the entire trial and not just the final Totem fight. I can now catch a Yungoos called Gosers. and I also catch a Spearow, and then meet the stupidest trainer of all time who trades me her Hawlucha for my Spearow. That does mean that I have an incredible encounter before the first Grand Trial, and Char will make things a lot easier going forward. I also catch a cutie fly called Cuters, who will be great for my first Grand Trial. I rescue the purple cloud again, but I'm challenged to a fight with Dulce and his incredibly tough Furfrou, but Honkers, Snakers and Char help me win the battle with no casualties. There's fights against How and an ace trainer with a strong Butterfree next, but these end up being easy so I'll skip them. Honkers evolves into Brionne but won't be used much for the next fight, against Hala for Grand Trial 1. I lead with Snakers to get off an Intimidate on his lead Machop and use Glare. Cuters then switches in on a weak Revenge and starts going for silver wins, and then a crit Revenge almost gets the kill. I am patient with Roost though, and eventually Machop is fully paralyzed twice in a row as Silverwind gets the Omni boost, which seals Hala's fate. Draining Kisses help take out his Makuhita and Crabrawler, thus winning me my first Grand Trial. That was incredibly easy, and with the several Bug, Fairy and Flying types available before this fight, it will always be easy. The next important fight is against Dexio and his Psychic types, but for now, because I have Inkers, it's not as challenging and I'm able to win without any issues. I catch a Lillipup called Puppers, and now have a battle with How, whose Torracat starts off with a Z move that doesn't do as much as Snakers paralyzes him. Brionne is burnt on the switch, which means Aqua Jet isn't doing much, so I switch back to Snakers for a second attack drop, then to Char, who can set up with 2 Horn Claws, use Roost to recover, and then sweep through the rest of his team. My next encounters are a Mareep called Eepers and a Pikipek called Peppers. I then have the first battle against this blonde kid who is stopping himself from jerking off? Seriously, what's wrong with this kid? Anyway, I can win this fight easily without many issues, without even needing to use Char. I then trade Puppers for a Noibat called Noi Noi. Next up is Trial 2, and during a fight against a Jupiter, Eepers gets trapped through Spider Web, and because I didn't realize that he could call for more help, Eepers falls. That sucks and means I have to go into the Totem Araquanid fight with only 5 Pokemon. I lead with Gorsers, who barely tanks a bubble before getting off a Leer. I then let Gorsers fall and switch to Pippers. Pippers gets off a nasty Pluck which almost does half damage but then falls to 2 bubbles. I bring in Noi Noi, who falls to a single Aurora Beam. Yikes. Honkers is out next and uses Encore as Araquanid uses Leech Life, which means I can switch to Char and then take out the Jupiter. I then use Horn Claws, Encore Araquanid into using Leech Life again, and an Aerial Ace takes him out, winning me the trial with only 2 Pokemon remaining. My reward is a Waterinium Z I won't use and a Psyduck called Spicers. I then get a good encounter in Mudbray called Mudders, who is going to be a reliable Pokemon going forward. Chat then convinces me to enter the Battle Royale with this masked guy I don't recognize, the blonde guy with a high sex drive, and reliable old How. I don't consider this part of the Nuzlocke, but I'm still able to win with Honkers at 5 HP, which is cool I guess. I also catch Fletcher's the Fletchling as Trial 3 begins, and I have to analyze some Dancing Marowak and a random Hiker. Okay. Totem Marowak time. I lead with Arbok, damage from the previous 2 fights. I still am able to get off a Glare as Salazzle is called out. I switch to Spicers for a planned sacrifice, and she is able to get off a Vital Water Pulse on Marowak, which also gets a Confusion. Once Spicers falls, I bring in Mudders, who does great damage with Bulldoze on Marowak and takes out Salazzle. I stay in, and thankfully Marowak detects, and poison damage activates Mudder's Vicky Berry, allowing him to get off a Bulldoze which nearly knocks Marowak out. Char switches in on a critical hit Hex, but I don't want to risk a Rock Tomb miss, so use Encore, then Roost Up, and then take Marowak out with Rock Tomb. Not knowing the movesets of these Pokemon makes these fights a lot more challenging than I would have originally thought, but Char is a godsend who has been a major contributor to every major fight since he came on. Speaking of godsends, I now get the holy grail of Nuzlocke, a post-physical special split Magikarp, who evolves into Gyarados and is called Yonkers. Up next is the Totem Lurantis fight, and this will be a long one. I cycle through between Yonkers and Snakers to put Lurantis at -3 attack. I switch to Fletchers on a Solar Blade and a freaking Ancient Power which gets the knockout. Not knowing what to do, I switch to Snakers for a 4th Intimidate. I stay in and try Glare, which doesn't work due to Leaf Guard as Snakers falls. Hawlucha comes in to Encore Lurantis into Exeter and Kecleon into Sunny Day, and then uses Rock Tomb a few times, using Roost to stay healthy, while I hope for no crits. Eventually, Lurantis does fall to the red, but then uses Synthesis, which takes the wind out of me. Kecleon lands a crit Dizzy Punch and another confuses, but Char fights out of it to get off a Roost. I'm getting really lucky here. I switch to Grubbers to get rid of all the speed drops due to low sweeps from Lurantis. Eventually, after a few switches, I start going after Kecleon and then switch back to Char, who uses a Rock Tomb on the Kecleon to take her out. Lurantis won't call for Comfrey till it's at over 60% HP, but I have no idea how this works during the battle. I rightfully set up Hone Claws though, then use Rock Tomb, hoping to waste Lurantis' Synthesis PP, which it eventually does run out of. I can now safely use Roost and set up multiple Hone Claws, as Lurantis can't do much. Comfrey is finally in and does start supporting Lurantis, who still has Solar Blade PP left. I switch to Cuters, who also resists all of Lurantis' moves, and takes her out with Silver Winds. Comfrey is pretty much useless now and falls as I make it out with only one death. I catch an Alolan Diglett next called Duggars and a Phantom called Phanters, who evolves into a Trevenant due to this helpful NPC I meet. Last of my few encounters is Stuffle before my grand trial against Olivia. Yonkers leads against a Anorith. I then switch to Duggars, who uses Work Up, then Rock Tomb to take Anorith out. Lileep is next, so I switch to Yonkers, who uses an Ice Fang for great damage, and then Lileep gets a crit Ancient Power which does half. No bother, right?
Oh, that's a crit, that's fine then. If it's a crit, it's fine. Oh no. What? She got 2 crits in a row, dude!
Okay. Char comes in and...
What is going on?
Wow, this has to be the luckiest Lileep of all time. I use Roost and Lileep finally hits a non-crit Ancient Power as Flying Press takes it out. Lycanroc gets a flinch with Bite and takes decent damage from Flying Press. I then switch to Stuffers, who can win the fight with Brick Break. Losing Yonkers usually isn't that bad, but losing her in a blind Nuzlocke when she is arguably the best lead for fights I know nothing about, and especially because it was due to 2 crits in a row and a 5% Ice Fang miss, really hurts. Anyway, I catch a Pyukumuku and then destroy a Nielgo. Against Hau, I lead with Char, who almost faints to an Inferno Overdrive. I use Roost and Fire Fang does a lot, so I switch to Honkers, who takes a healthy chunk from Fire Fang, then gets flinched from Bite. I switch to Stuffers on another Bite, who then takes a Fire Fang before using All Out Pummeling, which does a lot, but I don't realize that Torracat is now in Blaze, and another Fire Fang takes Stuffers out. That's sad, but it's on me. I'm able to win the fight with Fletcher's taking out Torracat, Duggars barely taking out Raichu, and then Fletcher's coming back in to set up to +6 attack and speed with Workups and Flame Charges on Leafeon, which allows him to take the rest of Hau's team out. A few new encounters in Poliwhirl, Grimer and Komala are next. Death number 11 is Cuters, who is cleanly one-shot by this Beware, which is pretty much on me for not realizing how feeble Cuters is. Thanks for all your help, buddy, you were great in the early game. My fortunes do turn around as I manage to catch a Skarmory, an incredible encounter in vanilla games despite this one not having Sturdy. The next trial is the electric type one against Totem Togedemaru, who gets a +2 defense boost. I'm leading with Comers here, who is able to get off a Yawn into Togedemaru as I switch in Duggars on a nasty Iron Head and Steel Wing combo. Mudders comes in, but Togedemaru wakes up in one turn. Mudders gets tormented and uses high horsepower into Spiky Shield. Iron Head and Steel Wing do a lot, and Mudders gets flinched, which also means that he still can't use high horsepower due to being tormented. This looks bad. Togedemaru uses Spiky Shield again, and I try to salvage Mudders by switching around, but due to having no idea what kind of team to take, one of my team of 6 is Ditto's the Ditto. Due to not having good counters, I switch to Comers, who takes one for the team and falls. Ditters comes in, gets flinched, tormented, and then falls. Duggars comes in to use a Bulldoze, which does not even do half before falling. I switch to Phanters, who gets off a Will-O-Wisp, but then falls to bounce from Togedemaru. Eventually, Steeners falls too, and I wiped during Trial 5, which sucks. I was unlucky there, but also had really poor team selection. The next few attempts can be skipped as I wiped to Dexio once to the Roost Ace Trainer, and then to Dulse, primarily due to not having Char or Furfrou early on during these attempts. Attempt 6 is different. I finally have both Furfrou and Hawlucha, and I'm back to using Brionne as my starter. Cha is so good, and I'm able to use him optimally to take out the Totem Araquanid without any deaths during the fight. I lose 3 though to Totem Marowak, Arbok, Psyduck and Herdier, but win with Furfrou's help. I even destroy Olivia while being 2 levels under the level cap because I have such good encounters, with Kaidas the Gyarados, Passers the Passimian and Duggars joining the team. I just want to point out though that Hawlucha is a potential sweeper in literally all the trials and grand trials until this point, and the game gives you access to it after trial 1 through not only finding it in the wild but also via trading a simple Spearow. I don't know how I feel about that in terms of game design, but I really appreciate it during this blind Nuzlocke. I also appreciate this wild Beldum as my encounter instead of a Ditto. We're now back to Totem Togedemaru, and this battle is interesting. Okay, Totem Togedemaru, defense roars sharply. Please use Detect. Oh, it didn't use Detect. That's a lot of damage. I bulldoze. What the fuck? That was amazing. I obviously am able to beat the Skarmory for my furthest attempt. Some appreciation now for the Acerola mini cutscene before the Totem Mimikyu fight. You rarely see such stuff in Pokemon games, and it was actually quite chilling. Anyway, on to the fight, and Mimikyu gets an Omni boost from the start, which is really scary. I lead with Meowers with the expectation that I would need to sacrifice him. I use Shadow Ball to get rid of her disguise, while Playrough does a lot despite Meowers' fur coat ability. I stay in and Mimikyu luckily misses Playrough, which means Meowers can get off a Screech before Banette gets rid of half his HP with a curse that takes Meowers down. Your sacrifice will not be in vain, buddy. I send out Spinners the Ariados, who I brought as a potential sacrifice and because he has 2 priority moves in Shadow Sneak and Sucker Punch, both of which are good into ghost types. A Shadow Claw and Feint attack combo does a lot as Banette is in the red due to Shadow Sneak. I use Shadow Sneak again to take it out as Spinners falls to a Shadow Claw. I then send in the ever reliable Kaidas to get an Intimidate off. She tanks a Playrough but then misses Thunder Wave, which means she's probably not that reliable. So I switch to Furrows, who dodges a Playrough, tanks the next one well and then uses a Sand attack and a couple of Baby Doll Eyes. I switch to Scarrers, who uses Rock Tomb 3 times as Jellicent comes in. Since Scarrers is faster now, I use a Roost, then misses Tailwing, then switch to Kaidas. Mimikyu has missed quite a few attacks due to the 1 Sand attack, which is great value. Kaidas gets rid of Mimikyu with an Aqua Tail due to its defense being at -1 from the Screech earlier. Jellicent can't do much and falls to a couple of bites, and I've beaten Totem Mimikyu. I catch a Shuppet called Shuppers, a Scraggy called Scraggers, and a Cottony called Cotters. I then get overconfident against this random Team Skull Grunt, who gets a free high jump kick against my Duggars and knocks him out. Sorry for letting you fall like that, buddy. Up next is the Guzma fight to save the young goose. He leads with the Golisopod and I lead with Kaidas. I then switch to Eepers, who gets off a Volt Switch which almost one-shots Golisopod, who switches out due to emergency exit. Masquerain comes in and I underestimate his damage output as Bug Buzz nearly kills, while Volt Switch does the same, and I bring in Scarrers, who takes some damage but then takes out Masquerain with Payback. Kaidas comes in on the Pinsir and gets off an Aqua Tail. I then switch to Poppers, who can't use Sparkling Area due to Throat Chop, so I encore it into X-Scissor and then use Sparkling Area twice to take out Pinsir. Golisopod is next, and I stay in to use Baby Doll Eyes, but Golisopod uses First Impression, which takes out my starter. I'm so upset at myself for doing that when I had 3 other potential switches and should have expected First Impression to kill, despite being not very effective. I switch to Kaidas, who tanks a Sucker Punch and then takes Golisopod out with a Crunch. Guzma then has a mental breakdown, but we get the young goose, so it's okay. The blonde edgy teen then wants to fight me for saving the young goose, so I lead with Kaidas, who can 2-shot his Golbat with Ice Fang. Type Null comes in and uses Hyper Voice, which should have clued me in on the fact that it's not actually Type Null. I switch to Scarrers after paralyzing it, and then Rock Tomb misses while Scarrers takes a couple of hits of Snarl, so I'm still not aware of the fact that this is obviously not Type Null. I use Torment once, and then finally use Cross Poison from Zubers, which reveals Zoroark's illusion. Zoroark misses his second Snarl and then remains paralyzed twice, and falls with Zubers at full HP. Crush Claw does a lot, but a Torment means that Type Null can't use it twice in a row. With the help of Roosts, I'm able to stay healthy, and then Crush Claw causes a defense drop, so I switch to Eepers, who takes a lot from X-Scissor. I then switch to Scarers, who gets its defense drop from Crush Claw as well, so I can Roost on the next turn. Eventually, Gravelers gets a lot of value with a couple of Thunder Punches while surviving on 6 HP. Scraggers comes in on a second Crush Claw crit, which is scary and annoying. Zubers then gets hit with a Crush Claw, which gets another defense drop. This is getting very awkward, especially because I can't switch on the turn when it won't use Crush Claw because it's now using Pursuit. I eventually decide to sack Scraggers, then go back to Zubers to get rid of the defense drop, who can finally get rid of the incredibly lucky Type Null. Up next is the Grand Trial against Nanu, and he leads with a Sableye as I lead with Kyders. Kyders uses Aqua Tail twice to take her out. Alolan Persian comes in, so I switch to Passers expecting a Power Gem. Passers reduces her speed with Rock Tomb and flinches due to Dark Pulse. Another Dark Pulse crits and I was dumb enough to not play around it, so Passers falls. I'm getting quite reckless here. Anyway, I switch to Zubers, who is faster, so Roost can help negotiate against the Persian's Power Gems. I don't realize though that Power Gem has more PP than Roost, but once I do, I switch to Leech Life, which crits and does a lot, which prevents Power Gem from killing. I use another Leech Life for Nanu heals. I switch to Char, Encore Persian into Power Gem, then use Roost to stay healthy. Flying Press takes the Persian out, and last is Krokorok, who also falls to Flying Press for a relatively easy win. Char is definitely one of the best Nuzlocke Pokemon I've ever used. I then have a panic attack as Gyarados is just wagging its tail at me, and at this point I assume it's a glitch and I have to reset to my last save point, but thankfully a quick search online tells me that I just need to get its attention. Phew. Next up is the double battle against Hau against an Ether Foundation employee and Faba, but Kaido sets up a Dragon Dance and helps us win easily. I then have another fight with Guzma and I'm a bit scared from last time. I lead with Char, who does a decent chunk with Flying Press, then takes a lot from Razor Shell. I switch to Kaidos as Guzma switches to Vikavolt, so I switch to Eepers, who does a decent chunk with Power Gem, as Bug Buzz brings him down to 2 HP. I have to stay in though, but Eepers high rolls to take him out. Next in is Pinsir, so I switch to Zubers on an X-Scissor, then dodge a Stone Edge and use Wing Attack for decent damage. I switch to Scarers, who is able to roost through the Stone Edges. I can now use Toxic and stall Pinsir out, who was doing a lot of damage, presumably due to maximized attack EVs. Golisopod comes in, so I switch to Kaidos, who can set up Dragon Dance 5 times and Golisopod just keeps going for Sucker Punch. A Crunch takes Golisopod and Masquerain out for the win. Next up is the fight against Ether President Lusamine, and this one will be painful. She leads with a Clefable and I lead with Kaidos, who can use an Aqua Tail for more than half damage. I switch to Scarers, who takes a Hyper Voice crit easily as Steel Wing takes Clefable out. I stay in on Lopunny, who gets a freeze with Ice Punch. I switch to Belders, who takes a Thunder Punch, which indicates random AI, which is really bad. I use Agility on a second Thunder Punch, then go for Meteor Mash, which misses, and then Belders takes a lot from Fire Punch. My luck sucks here. At this point, I'm not thinking about wiping, so I decide to save Belders by switching to Gravelers, who gets off a Thunder Punch, but then Lusamine switches to her Lilligant, who uses Teeter Dance. A Petal Dance does more than half into Char as she's encored into using the move. I am in trouble here, so I decide to sack Gravelers, and this allows a safe switch into Eepers, who thankfully gets the paralysis on Lilligant via static. I now sack Eepers and bring in Kaidos, hoping to set up a sweep with Dragon Dance. I use Dragon Dance, and Lilligant uses Stun Spore. A Crunch does more than half and Lilligant then uses Teeter Dance. Kaidos then hits herself in confusion twice in a row and falls to a Petal Dance. I switch to Char, who can take Lilligant out with the Flying Press, but this battle is pretty much over. Beware comes in and thankfully doesn't get crits with Zen Headbutt. Eventually Char takes her out with the Flying Press crit, which is also unlucky because if I didn't get the crit there, I could have gotten off a Roost to be closer to full HP against the Lopunny. This does mean that Lopunny is able to take Char out with a Thunder Punch. Thanks for all your help, buddy. Belders survives an Ice Punch and takes Lopunny out, but then even at +1 speed is outsped by Milotic, who takes builders out for the end of attempt 6. I don't usually whine about luck, but that sucked. Anyway, I'm too deep into this game now, so when I do reset, I can't really call it a blind Nuzlocke anymore. But this video has gone on long enough, and my next one will go through my attempts to do a normal, hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokémon Ultra Sun. If you enjoyed this video, I request you to please leave a like and subscribe to my channel. Also, do check out my Twitch channel where I'm currently streaming my hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokemon Radical Red. Thanks for watching. See ya!